from WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. The title of our episode, The Bill Cosby Factor, on the 9th of November 2013, and still making a few sound adjustments here to make sure that things are as they appear to be, we hope. Now, alright, very good. Firstly, let's take care of a little business from last night. We finished most of the cities that we decided to spotlight. We obviously couldn't spotlight every city, but we did spotlight most of the cities there. Out in the Midwest, Minneapolis is one we did not finish up because it was not called. It was called later today. Let me just go to that. And effectively what happened was there were several council races that were resolved, and some longtime council types lost their seats, and some that were new to the ball game, so to speak, have taken over those particular seats. A new mayor was elected based on what's called a ranked choice system, named Jacob Fry. Fry, in the initial round, before they started the second and third choices, was roughly at 25%. He ended up at 45% of the vote and was elected mayor when the other candidates collapsed, and one of the Bernie-endorsed candidates ended up in second place. And part of the problem was there were 3 progressive candidates running, including the mayor, a state representative, and let's see who else was there. A state representative and an African American, a law professor, and community activist. So with all those people there, when they start dealing with the first, second, third votes, the Professor Pounds, after she had collapsed, those votes were redistributed, and finally the other business-friendly candidate collapsed, and when he collapsed, Fry. So what you basically have is, we don't have the official totals from the Minnesota Secretary of State, but it was roughly about a 40% turnout, and that's pretty good for a municipal election these days. And this candidate ended up with 45% of a 40% turnout. You can see a relatively dismal amount of votes there. Let's see, we have the tallies here from their Secretary of State. Well, he had 45%, so we don't have, I guess, the actual tally here. It was winning with 45%. We did have the vote numbers up. Oh, I guess we do. 46,719 votes that he was able to garner. The second place person, Ray Denham, at 34,000 votes, and 22,000 got exhausted. So in other words, that was basically the way. In other words, 22,000 were exhausted. The second place person got 33% of the total vote there. That was a Bernie endorsed candidate, and the winner was at 45%, or 46,000 votes. So that was roughly 10,000, a little over 10,000 vote advantage there, is the way the race went out. But these were well-funded candidates, and thus they were able to move forward in the race. A few $100,000 were spent, and business, Chamber of Commerce type organizations sponsor them. Also in this race, in some of the ward races, you had two transgender people running. a person named Cunningham and Ms. Jenkins evidently were running here. Jenkins had 73% of the vote. Cunningham had 49% of the vote. Well, I don't know. They evidently didn't rank choice it, but that was basically about it. Retired a 20-year veteran type that had been around for a very long time. So that ended that particular situation. Let me just give the polling numbers while I'm here, and we'll go on to the episode, the Bill Cosby Factor. We'll be talking about Harvey Weinstein and what has happened to him, and when you put a European face on this sexual harassment environment. Gallup has DJ Trump. This is on Wednesday. Wait a minute here. Yeah, this is on Wednesday at 38%. Rasmussen at 42%. It's basically where it's set. Reuters at 35%. It's slightly low there. The Internet poll, YouGov at 40%. And generic ballot. Excuse me. This is the congressional proof. Forget that. We'll even put that one up. It's at 21%. It's always low. Doesn't really matter. Generic ballot from Reuters. The Democrats are up by 8. We would say that is relatively realistic given where they are in terms of right at this particular moment in history. From the Washington Post, a little headline here: Democrats speed Virginia's shift to a blue state thanks to Trump. Well, actually, the person that started this all was Barack Obama. Period. So that was what, as they say, ignited the entire firestorm there. One of the big headlines here from the Post: the cannery in the coal mine. Republicans fear Democrats win, mean more losses to come. No doubt about that. We talked last night, rather briefly, about the psychological factors involved in this type of race when you nationalize. And this race was indeed nationalized by no other than DJ Trump and his infamous Twitter feed. So now there's a situation with a lot of retirements going on and a lot of people coming forward that perhaps were not out there. From a veteran party strategist named Mike Murray, a critic of Trump. Trump is the anchor for the GOP. Well, the canary, did I say the canary? The canary in the coal mine didn't just pass out, its head exploded. It maybe imploded, exploded. There's no doubt about that. John Kirsch, who has never liked DJ Trump, said Tuesday's contest will lessen the GOP that catering to the party's conservative base with hardline appeals and incendiary language turns off moderate voters meaning independent voters. He said his party must choose between a political message of blaming and scapegoating or a more hopeful pitch centered around everyday issues such as health care and the economy. No doubt about it. This is a repudiation of politics to the narrow. Kirsch said he's the governor of Ohio in an apparent reference to Trump. The governor added the politics of anger may work for a moment in time, but it does not last long. Well, no doubt about that. That is a continual problem. Democrats said this repudiation in this anti-Trump vote, but it's clear to me it doesn't stick. That's from Robin Hayes, chair of the North Carolina Republican Party. Trump's entire extremely popular in lots of places, no doubt about that, but that's only in lots of places. From Tennessee, the governor there, when you see one night of elections, you see one night of elections. There's always a natural wind at your back, and if you're not in the White House, the wind is in your face if you are. Well, there's probably no doubt about that. Old Ed Rollins, who's been around lately since that Christ is a corporal. The White House isn't paying attention to the suburbs there, and there has never really been a political operation there. That's from Ed Rollins, political strategist for the Great American Alliance Super PAC. That's a pro-Trump PAC. They have to develop a strategy where it's not just Trump alone winning and where the party is winning as a whole. Well, they did do that. They took on a Bannon attitude there, and that attitude, for the true believers, that works. But the Republicans have had a history with true believers out there, the radical types that are talk show hosts. The Tutan Christie, the governor now and will be the ex-governor of New Jersey, had an audition for a talk show host. Talk show hosts speak to the bare emotions of people. They use issues that are familiar to the people and can be exploited very easily. Now, the more gutter type talk show hosts, what they do is, for instance, if they're talking about, we're talking about President Barack Obama's birth certificate, they would have to repeat it 5, 6, 7, 10 times within their hour, literally about every 5 or 10 minutes, because the retention level of the audience is very, very low. So they have to continually repeat this, and this is why repetitive, sort of like Pablo's dog. If you beat the sound, the dog will come. So this is what basically happened at a slogan there and build a wall. Well, yeah, haven't heard much about that wall lately. That wall is setting out that they have built part of a wall. So somebody said they were going to put an experiment up there for the wall, but don't count much on the walls. It's sort of like put the monster, otherwise known as Corrupt Hillary, Crooked Hillary, in a jail. Well, there's talk about putting a lot of people in jail now, and not only Crooked Hillary. So there you go. Trump's friends at the Capitol say the visions were more about style than substance. The difficulty is we have a president who doesn't come from the Washington structure. Well, that's probably to the advantage. So it's really hard for people inside the structure, outside the structure, to evaluate him. That's from David Perdue. He used to be a governor of Georgia. Now he's a senator there, and he probably would have not won an election had not been for that. It also comes amidst an exodus of Republican House members. Frank Lobando of Jersey, Poll, of Texas. They are leaving out of there. And various other people. Ryan Costello, he's from Pennsylvania. They are on slippy ice. And part of this was motivated to the racism against Barack Obama. And that was something that was woven into the fabric of the country. When you portray the country as Bill Clinton did in his conservative democratic operation as a centered country, a right of center country. Let me get that right here. Well, we may conclude the country is right, but not necessarily right of center. It has moved from the majority of the people, that is, from right of center to more center and a little bit left if you start looking at some of the charts. Now, here in Virginia, you have to understand, Virginia, when you talk about Richmond, that is where Mr. Lee himself set up his headquarters and the Confederacy there. They have more monuments there than Carter had Liberty in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And there are parts of the state are as southern as can be. It's a southern state. And when you get out of the D.C. area, and you have to remember now, D.C. itself in Maryland, these are all southern states. These states were very close together. They're not very far from Philadelphia and the great battlefield like Gettysburg, etc. Now, when you look at all of this, it is fairly predictable. If you run candidates that are to the right, I noticed Nathan Natham, or whatever his name is, talked about diversity. He's from the Eastern Shore of Maryland. Now, the Eastern Shore, that is the the Eastern Shore of Virginia. But nonetheless, this situation is he catered to more to the right, but moved to the left because he needed the suburban area around Washington, D.C., extraburbs. He got that. And even in some of the more red areas of Virginia, he was able to prevail. Thus, he got the 8.59 points there. But this changes. A lot of this is based upon what people see on TV. They see, well, they hear this guy talking there with a southern accent, and at the same time, he's talking about fairly moderate positions, and some would say more radical types like diversity. You had transgender people, like out in the Midwest, win in Virginia. In fact, one won in a district where an old-timer called himself the head homophile. Well, those days have changed. When you look at it this is what set up this whole Bill Cosby schism also. That, again, they used race on Bill Cosby. Was Bill Cosby not without guilt? No. But the whole point there is this thing prevailed in Hollywood. It was there before Bill Cosby got there. Way before Bill Cosby ever got there, when the studios were King and Cecil DeMille and etc. were around. There were people running the couch casting. I don't know what Cecil DeMille, but anyway, they were running the couch casting back in those days. It was part of Hollywood. In Hollywood, you have to look at it, especially in the early days, even when Bill got there, was still a company town. So if you were a producer or a director or whomever, had some power there, you could move the talent, because if you, say, put out for an actress, we won't go into actors, but a few thousand would show up. Well, out of a few thousand, you're probably at least going to have 5 or 10 that are almost equally talented. So you have to have some sort of way of distinguishing between these people, because you're working on a subjective situation, because you don't know at that point in time who will become, quote-unquote, a big star and who will not. We don't usually have that these days. We have stars that show up for a movie or two, and then they sort of disappear from the horizon. And if you don't go to the, the TZ or whatever it is, site, you won't see them. Or if you watch, I don't know if Entertainment Tonight's still in business. But anyway, or you get the tabloids, or you look at the tabloids at the market. But basically what's happened is, when you have reality TV and reality stars, here comes DJ Trump, that has taken a lot of the so-called glamour out of there. Now look what's happening to Mr. Spacey, that they've literally pulled a movie in the making. The House of Cards was a deck of cards, and they will Netflix will no longer produce it because they are scared of the reaction. It's not based upon Kevin Spacey alone. It is based upon this whole situation with Harvey Weinstein. They have investigated. In fact, the grand jury in New York has listened to evidence. They're investigating him in London. He lost control of his company, and he had said at one time this company was worth, $800 million or whatever. He can't even get $35 million for the thing. So in other words, this is what happens when you get out there, and a lot of the feminists got out there on Bill Cosby, as they did on the All-American hero O.J. Simpson, who started all this. And you had various talk show hosts that used the O.J. Simpson trial, the trial of the century, where they put race front and forward in that situation, and this is what brought that about. O.J. was the villain, and he was the only villain for domestic abuse. They advertised it, but they didn't do a damn thing about it. They talked about it. Old Denise Brown was going to build all these houses. As far as we know now, we have to stand to be corrected here. Denise never put up a room, or even we'd say in the old military, the pup tent. So this is the kind of thing that you have. You have the talk, the rhetoric, the politicians got on. In fact, Bill Clinton said it to TV and basically said, "Oh hell," when he heard the verdict. But he himself, and O.J. never had to do this, had to literally go down and show his testicles or have them photographed for the court. So he had his own situation coming up there. And had he been in this environment now, he would have been, as they say, part of the history of O.J. Simpson and on to Bill Cosby, because they put the quote-unquote black face on Bill Cosby, and immediately you had the Gloria O'Brien and et cetera there, her daughter Bloom, all out there. In fact, old Bloom, was it Bloom? All right. Anyway, one of them, they were representing, I think, all right, they were Bloom. They were representing Harvey Weinstein. She had to give up Harvey Weinstein. She was defending him at first, and it became so indefensible that women were coming forward and they verified their statements, and all hell basically broke loose. Let me get this New York Times article here on poor old Harvey, and where his, as they say, fate has been. And Bill Cosby, of course, was in the civil court. He settled a civil a situation, and he settled, which the deposition was unsealed, not known, and he was taken into, I have to find that one. He was literally taken into a criminal court, and the jury hung up. So now they're going to retry Mr. Cosby, but it's very, very difficult. The problem that you have with rape cases is sexual assault cases, they now call them. Let me try to clean it up a little bit. Is that the longer the case lingers out there, you don't have the evidence. You don't have the forensic evidence there. Usually after a few days, all the forensic stuff is lost or is just not there. So then you're dealing with either he say, she said, or whatever else, and you have to get whatever collateral evidence you can get to support your position. And then you know, it's sort of like Constand there, and some of the other women, things get enhanced, and when you enhance various things, you have problems. You don't really have a solid line to deal with. So thus you have a situation where you get into one person said this, another person said that, and you really are having all kinds of problems there. And this is part and parcel of what you can get into at certain junctures when you trying to find Harvey Weinstein real quickly here. So you get into at certain junctures when you don't have any type of DNA evidence or anything of that nature. You have a problem where you have to deal with emotional appeal. Well, for those of us who've been around for a while, understand that in the 50s, 60s, a lot of rape cases in the South were tried on this very situation, emotional evidence, and we can go to various situations where people, the Scottsboro Boys example, where people said they were sexually assaulted, and in time they admitted they were not sexually assaulted. So that we have to really watch out where we are in those kinds of instances, because you can literally come up very, very short anytime you start dealing in those types of innuendos, frame situations, bandwagon type things where people immediately get on the bandwagon, and then you are out there, and the lawsuits and accompanying lawsuits will, end up costing millions of dollars. Will Harvey Weinstein eventually go to jail? Very difficult to say on this. We don't know. The grand jury, of course, is meeting, and we'll have to, as they say, stay tuned on that one to find out exactly where we are going with this, because we don't know. But it's a situation that if a person were at the top, as his boutique film studio was, and then all of a sudden everything falls apart, and that is where we are now. And it's not the best situation for anyone concerned out there. When once you start, and all of a sudden, bam, you are at a situation where people are kicking you out of the academy. They are revoking various things they've given to you in the past. So you now find yourself not in the best of the best situation to carry forward. Let me just pick this up over at the BBC. We're going to have to go over there and get this latest Harvey Weinstein special here. The latest edition, I guess I should say, to it. Incidentally, President Barack Obama had reported for jury duty out in the city of Chicago. One of the things that has happened to many people in the past. I'm looking at the BBC here. Another reported. This is a child abuse thing. A little different there. But Spacey, ex-news anchor, said, is he broke his son? Huh. Oh, I tell you, it's always something coming out here. So we have now as they say, an avalanche of these types of stories here, and I'm not sure. This is, let me see, who is this? Kevin Spacey's emerged, claims working in Hollywood. This is contacted here. Former TV anchor Heather Urich told a press conference in Boston that her son had been sexually assaulted by Spacey at the age of 18 in a bar in Nantucket, Mass. Spacey had bought her son alcohol, and it's 21 is the drinking age there. We don't really know what that is, but the thing is, these things start to come out, and they continue to come out. His house of cards is now under the Bill Cosby factor, and this is one of the things that happens. Spacey is there. You got Harvey Weinstein there, and this is who we were wanting to talk about. And get it out here to the people. And see where we go with this particular allegation. But this is what happens when, here we go, Harvey. Yeah, this is where we were. You finally get the story. We'll get it from the BBC. Film companies up for sales, talks collapse. This is what we were looking at earlier today. They had a preliminary deal with Colony Capital. That is one of the venture capitalist operations. Found the firm was less appealing there. Weinstein's is facing a number of sexual allegations. He owns about 20% of the Weinstein Company, or did own about 20% of the Weinstein Company. And the Colonial Capital, as it's called, billionaire Thomas Brockett told the Bloomberg News. Let me go to this New York Times report here, because they originally reported this, and also to Bloomberg. Now we'll get this right. Eventually we get everything somewhere around this place. Police in London and, of course, New York are investigating him. So in other words, we have a fury of investigations and legal activities going at the same time. The BBC has something in 10... Miramax film production company was bought by the Weinstein brothers there, and this Colonial fund management company, capital management company, has about $56 billion under consideration. Now, according to Harvey Weinstein, the Western Company includes its film library is worth $800 million, but they wouldn't give him 35 here. Let's go to the Times, which originally we're looking for. I don't know what happened to it. Things sometimes disappear. Potential buyer walked away from the company on Tuesday, and this is a Colonial Capital. It found more disorder than it expected, less value once it started close examination of the studio. The preliminary agreement was to give the Weinstein Company immediate cash. Of course, that fell apart. By Wednesday, the acquisition had also broken down, in part because of Colonial's desire to structure any purchase in a way that would not enrich Harvey Weinstein. The spokesman for the Weinstein Company didn't respond. I imagine they wouldn't respond. Executives at Weinstein had been talking to the Fortress Investment Group, that's a private equity fund also, about potential financial package valued at about $35 million would provide enough liquidity for the studio to operate roughly through January. That's a very short time there. So they are basically going out of business in a hurry. After they broke down, the Times reported Weinstein had employed. Now, this is one of the deals. A private investigator. Of course, when you're involved in civil litigation, like he is, the getting a private investigator is not unusual. But this was to dig up dirt on journalists and his accusers. Now, his accusers, we understand. That is standard operating procedure. But when you start talking about journalists there, well, you know how that is not a good idea there. But anyway, this is from Bloomberg. This is Bartrack, I suppose I get his name right here, a financial lifeline, linked the company to critically injured patients. And so in other words, he's calling it a critically injured patient, and said it could be revived if linked couldn't be revived, could be revived linked to the co-founder Harvey was removed. So in other words, this is why Harvey Weinstein is in the Bill Cosby factor. Bill Cosby's fortune, he is not out there. If you remember the story of Bill Cosby was removed from an upcoming NBC special he was going to have out there, and for a while some of even his sitcoms from his family sitcom were not shown. So those are some of the problems coming there. Old Harvey is facing mounting of sexual assault, allegations of sexual assault and harassment dating back to the 90s. With a cash infusion, is considering buying some of all of his assets. Well, Colony would acquire the entire company, adding that evaluating which liabilities against Harvey are attributed to the company is like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube problem. If the Weinstein element could be removed, if the toxicity of the liability that surrounds it could be addressed, and if the content of the company could continue in a normal way, there is some value. Barkrack said you have 150 individuals. You are a TV production company. You have an independent film company. You have a distribution company, which has counterparts that are relying on stability. There's a difference between the Weinsteins and the company. He added, Harvey, whatever the accusations are, his conduct was totally unacceptable, reprehensible, unacceptable in any terms. No one is interested in salvaging a company that would benefit Harvey. So, in other words, that is where it is different there. They shut down Bill Cosby. Some of them thought it was, as they say, shorthand was cute to shut down Cosby. They all gathered around. Many of the women that made allegations proved to be absolutely baseless. Some did in the proceeding, but only one case proceeded criminally. That's Constand out of Canada. And she had gotten a settlement from Bill Cosby. Now, this is one thing to remember for young civil litigators and anyone getting in this situation, that if you have allegations out there, and even when you get the documents sealed by court order, just remember there is perhaps circumstances that come unsealed, and that is what happened with this racist DA that ran literally on a campaign to replace the other DA that had made the plea agreement with Bill Cosby to try this case. And they had to literally bust a jury in from Pittsburgh. This time around, they have, of course, a different legal team, and they're going with the gentleman that represented Michael Jackson, a veteran criminal defense attorney. And they will no doubt take one from the from the Philadelphia area, around where he lives. But the problem is when you try a person a second time, of course, Bill Cosby, 80 years old, legally blind now, walking with a cane, you're not going to get a lot out of him. Even if you jail him for the rest of his life, you're jailing for the rest of his life. Weinstein, I think, is 65. He serves more as a symbol. Whether or not they send him to jail or not, we don't know. On these cases, we'll have to look and see what the grand jury decides and what the charges are. Just because someone's indicted by grand jury doesn't mean they're going to be convicted in a criminal trial. Very difficult thing to do, particularly if there's not any physical evidence out there. Now, there can be a testimony, and some of this is testimony collaborated by quote-unquote friends of the people that talked to them, and this is in the Times. It was on the 5th of October. I didn't date these. These others were, let me just get this right, were recent here, on the 7th of November. But anyway, nonetheless, this is on the 5th of October. Details some of the allegations here. Usually we would start with this, but we don't need to. Everyone has heard about that. 2 decades ago, he invited Ashley Judd to a Peninsula Beverly Hills hotel for what the young actress expected to be a business breakfast. Instead, he had sent her up to his room where he appeared in a bathrobe and asked if she could give him a massage. Evidently, this was done a number of times, and that was 2 decades, 20 years ago. And then they have a 2014 invited Emily Nestor, who had worked just one day as a temporary employee at the same hotel, made another offer. If she accepted his sexual advances, he would boost her career. The following year, once again at the Peninsula, a female assistant said Weinstein badgered her into giving him a massage while he was naked, leaving her crying and distraught, wrote a colleague named O'Brien. toxic environment for women at the company. Ms. O'Connor, I said O'Brien, O'Connor, sorry about that, to address several executives of the company run by Weinstein, wrote a memo, I guess. During that time, after being confronted with the allegations, including sexual harassment, unwanted physical contact, Weinstein reached out at least 8 settlements with women, according to company officials. Speaking of anonymity there, the Times have found a young assistant in New York back in 1990, an actress in 1997. That'd be 10 years ago. An assistant in London, an Italian model in 2015, and O'Connor shortly thereafter, according to records. Those familiar with the agreements. In other words, he'd also signed these agreements that are coming back to haunt one. And this is where we get to Bloom here. We talked about her earlier. She's the daughter of Gloria Allred. Lisa Bloom, an attorney advising Weinstein, said in a statement that he denies many of the allegations as patently false. And in comments to the Times there this week, Weinstein said that many claims in Ms. O'Connor's memo were off base, and that they had parted on good terms. I'm not so sure about that one. Anyway, Bloom had been advising Weinstein over last year on gender and power dynamics, called him an old dinosaur learning new ways. She said she had explained to him that due to power differences between major studio heads like him and most others in the industry, whatever his motives, some of his words and behaviors could be perceived as inappropriate and intimidating. Well, she has now, as they say, left the stage. The allegations have piled up and help help define popular culture. He has a collection of 6 pictures, Oscars, and turned into a number of touchstones from Sex, Lies, and videotapes, Pulp Fiction, and Good Will Hunting. The television show The Runaway Project, not familiar with that one at all. And what else does he have going there? During the Sundance Festival, when Park City, Utah held its version of a nationwide women's march, Mr. Weinstein joined in the parade. So there you go. From the outside, it seemed golden. The Oscar, the success, the remarkable cultural impact. This from Mark Gill, former president of Miramax. Remember Miramax? When the company was owned by Disney. Behind the scenes, it was a mess. It was the biggest mess of all, he added, referring to Weinstein's treatment of women. I remember one of the champions of women's rights, fella out of Oregon, Bob Packwood, was charged there, and he, not like Weinstein, totally different there. Weinstein enforced a code of silence. Employees of Weinstein Company had contracts saying that they would not criticize its leaders in any way that could harm the business reputation and employees' personal reputation. A recent document shows, and most of the women accepting payout agreements to the confidentiality clause prohibits them from speaking about the deals or events that led to it. That's pretty common, not something different. And here they mention old man Roger Ailes, the late Roger Ailes, and Bill O'Reilly, whose agreement between roughly Weinstein's agreements collected between 80,000 and 150,000 peanuts compared to the other two there. And the parties made peace quickly. This is O'Connor, and through her lawyer, Nicole Page, O'Connor declined to be interviewed because evidently settled in confidentiality there. That, again, this is not unusual. You heard some of that in Bill, but Bill Cosby only, as far as we know, had one settlement a little bit different there. In interviewing 8 women, described varying behaviors by Weinstein, appearing nearly fully nude in front of them, requiring them to be present when he bathed, or repeatedly asking for massages. And so far, I suppose that's all he did. He got massages, typically in their early or mid-20s, hoping to get a toehold in the film industry. That is not unusual. Most of them were on the casting couch. I haven't seen the allegation. Most women told the Times that they experienced a misconduct by Weinstein. Had never met one another. They ranged in age from 20s to late 40s, living in different cities. Some did not report the behavior because there were no witnesses. That's fairly typical. And let's see what else we got here. This is a longer, detailed situation here. The human resource operation was considered weak in New York and worse in London. So some of the employees banded together in solidarity. The female executive was asked to go to a meeting solo. She and a colleague would generally double up. As Mr. Gill from Miramax. Anyway, but in interviews, some of the former workers said they had troubling experiences with Weinstein, and asked a common question: how can allegations repeating the same pattern? Young women, a powerful producer, and even some the hotels have accommodations for almost 3 decades. Well, we don't know. Just the company town went on going. He could be charming, gracious, gift baskets, flowers, personal career help, and cash. And at the Cannes Festival, according to several former colleagues, he sometimes handed out thousands of dollars as impromptu bonuses. No doubt about that. Two sides to everything. It's a dialectical process. In the fall of 1998, 25-year-old London assistant named Zinda Perkins confronted him, and according to colleagues, she and several co-workers had been regularly subjected to inappropriate requests or comments in hotel rooms. She was particularly concerned about treatment of another woman in the office. She told Weinstein that he had to stop, according to a colleague, or she would go to the public and initiate legal action unless he changed his behavior. So, a lawyer from Miramax was dispatched to London to negotiate with Perkins and her lawyer. He declined to comment on that. Miss Perkins, now a theater producer in London, also did not comment. So you'll have a lot of this going on, period. For actors, a meeting with Weinstein could yield dazzling rewards. The King's Speech, popular attractions like the Scary Movie franchise. Weinstein's film helped define femininity, sex, romance for Catherine Zeta-Jones in Chicago to Jennifer Lawrence in The Silver Lining Playbook. So in other words, a lot of people were in this, and this is Ashley Judd here. What was she doing? Being a boxer or something. Anyway, let me finish this up. There's a whole listing of people. In 97, Weinstein reached a previously undisclosed with Rose McGuinn, then a 22-year-old actress. That was, 20 years ago? It was a $100,000 settlement. Doesn't say what the lawyers got. And in 2015, Weinstein invited Amber Belanti, an Italian model, and one that wanted to be an actress, on a Friday evening to discuss her career with an hour. She called the police. Belanti told them that Weinstein had grabbed her breasts after asking her if they were real and putting his hand up her skirt. Well, he was a busy man. The claims were taken up by the New York Special Victims Squad, and they were in the tabloids. The district attorney later declined to bring charges. Now, I'm not sure what, but Belanti, it says, got some money out of it, and they went on. So this is old Harvey with some more of his Shakespeare in Love. So in other words, he had a glorious life. This is from the Times report here, and we'll see it all. Let's look at our time, and we'll do the sports here. But nonetheless, the difference there. Harvey Weinstein has fallen under the Bill Cosby situation there. As Professor Reed out of Oakland basically said, in our words, what's good for Bill has become good for Harvey. So basically we have the Bill Cosby factor here, and it goes on now. It's all over Hollywood. It's the Kevin Spacey. And now old Kevin is being seen in the same light, basically, as Harvey. We'll go to the NBA here. Scores from last night. The Pacers were in the Motor City. Pistons 114 to 97. The Knickerbockers were at the Magic in Orlando. The Magic 112 to 99. The Lakers were in the Garden. Celtics 107 to 96. The Heat was in Phoenix, and the Heat indeed put the Heat on 126 to 115 over the Suns. The T-Wolves in the Bay. The Warriors 125 to 101. This is the end of basketball, at least on the 8th of November. A few teams were playing out there. This weekend, obviously, we'll have more college football coming up. And we wouldn't have had any games last night. But we will on a Friday night. Washington, number 9 Washington, will be at Stanford. On Saturday, Michigan State, Ohio State should be a good game. Number 12, Michigan State. Number 13, Ohio State. Rutgers will be at Penn State, who is number 14. And Oklahoma State at Iowa State. That is a 12 p.m. game also. And North Carolina State at Boston College. And Arkansas at LSU. They're all going here. Virginia Tech at Georgia Tech. Georgia and number 1, Georgia. Auburn, number 10. Florida State, Clemson. Clemson's number 4. Iowa and Wisconsin. Wisconsin's number 8. And at 4 o'clock in the evening, UCLA. USC, I'm sorry. O.J. Simpson's old school at Colorado. Washington State will be at Utah. And Alabama, who is number 2, will be at number 16, Michigan State. Purdue and Northwestern, they are 25. That's a night game. And Notre Dame and number 3. And Miami. TCU and number 6 and number 5. Oklahoma will be there. So that is the over-under in that game is 62. I can give the over-unders in most of these games. And the over-under in the Purdue game is 45. The over-under in the Washington State game is 52. And let's see what the over-under is 64. I guess it's going to be a high-scoring game. And let me skip up here in the Washington-Stanford game. It's 45, and that'll be on Friday. And Michigan State, Ohio State, should be a lot of bidding there. 54.5 is the over-under. 52.5 is the Rutgers and Penn State. Most of that will be Penn State. I don't know if I'd take that one or not. Arkansas and LSU, 56 is the over-under. And Georgia and Auburn, 47, not as high. But all these are usually seem to be in the 40s or whatever. So, in other words, you expect fairly high scoring games. And most of them will be played, in the 40s? A few in the 60s, 55 in the Georgia Tech game. 73 in the Big Easy. That's where LSU is. 38, will be in Boston on that day. And 79 at UFC. 37 at Penn State. Football-like, I guess. 39 at Ohio State. And at Stanford should be a nice game. 65 degrees there. Not bad at all. Look on the college playoff football. I'm not sure what's going on there. Usually I try to preview these, but we haven't got anything going on here now. OSU, Penn State, so forth and so on. Other scenarios here. Georgia, Notre Dame, Auburn reach. So in other words, we'll get back to this and find out more about it later. We have Friday Jobber coming up here. And we have a special report we're preparing on DJ Trump's trip to China. Perhaps we'll get that up later tonight here. And Friday Jobber, of course, tomorrow night. And Numbers Man this weekend. And an open source report. So we have a full category of things going on. Incidentally, we were over at iTunes today, of all places, and threw that up on the Facebook page. Don't do a lot with iTunes anymore because there's so many other things and going mobile. And in iTunes, basically music. They do have a podcasting section. So does Google Play. That section we'll get up there. So we have a little bit of, as they say, housekeeping to do, and we're still working on modernizing our logo. Good day.